Hello and welcome to DOZ Monologues, hosted by Eturuvie Erebor. DOZ Monologues, also known as DOZ Chronicles Audio Stories, aims to educate, inspire, and drive societal change. All stories are written and narrated by Eturuvie Erebor, and all rights are reserved, including the right of reproduction in whole or in part in any form. This is episode 19, titled A Bag of Jewels and a Web of Lies. If you're listening on YouTube, please subscribe, like, and share. Thank you. A Bag of Jewels and a Web of Lies. As I rode in the taxi from the force headquarters after meeting with the Assistant Commissioner of Police, my thoughts drifted to Essosa, whom I was on my way to see at the police station, and I reflected on everything that had happened over the past few months. Essosa and I were childhood friends, inseparable for many years, until after our National Youth Service. I moved from Abuja, where we had both served, and returned to Benin, while Essosa stayed behind to live with her aunt. Her aunt, Mrs. Uwa Amina Baffa, was Essosa's father's half-sister and married to General Ali Baffa, a military general turned politician and a very influential figure in the nation. Uwa lived in opulence, and Essosa believed that she would help her secure a good job and improve her life. But I had my doubts about the likes of Uwa, and soon enough, events proved me right. About a year after Essosa started living with Uwa, I received a call from her older sister, who informed me that Essosa was in Port Harcourt, recovering from a near-death experience caused by ritual killers. This was my first indication of the troubles she was about to face. A month later, I received a call from Essosa herself. She was back in Abuja, but not at her aunt's house. She was calling from the police station. She told me that she had been arrested for theft, but she had no idea what she was supposedly accused of stealing. She had already been at the police station for a month without bail. I had not yet fully grasped what Essosa had shared with me when 3 days after her call, her 3 older sisters visited. During their visit, I learned that Essosa was accused of stealing a bag of jewels from her aunt, Uwa. Uwa had been away in Benin campaigning for her senatorial election, and upon her return, she noticed that her jewelry chest was empty and that all her jewels were missing. A visit to a fetish priest revealed that Essosa had placed the jewels in a bag and handed the bag of jewels to a friend for safekeeping. I was the friend in question. The fetish priest had not said so, but they thought I must be the one, as I was Essosa's closest friend. The whole situation seemed absurd, and I dismissed it until the following week, when Essosa visited my home, accompanied by 5 police officers. We are with the Inspector General of Police's monitoring team at the force headquarters in Abuja, the leader of the squad said. Essosa was arrested by her aunt, Mrs. Uwa Baffa, almost 2 months ago for theft. We understand that she is your friend, and we have been asked to speak with you to gather information regarding this matter. May we come inside? I realized then that the situation was far more serious than I had initially thought, and could not be brushed aside. I invited the officers in, understanding that this was now a matter requiring my full attention. The policemen sat with me for some time, engaging in conversation that quickly revealed their perspective on the matter. It became apparent that as far as they were concerned, Essosa was innocent of the theft for which she had been accused. However, they explained that the Inspector General of Police himself had taken a personal interest in the case, and as a result, their hands were tied. They could not ignore direct instructions from such a high authority without risking their livelihoods. The officers informed me that they had been ordered to search my house for Mrs. Uwa Baffa's missing jewelry. Yet they made it clear that they had no intention of conducting a search, as they did not believe any jewelry was actually missing. After our conversation, I was asked to provide a statement and was then invited to Abuja to meet with their boss. I agreed to this meeting because I believed it would offer me greater insight into the situation, both from the police's perspective and from Essosa's, with whom I had not yet had a chance to speak privately. Upon my arrival in Abuja, I headed straight to the force headquarters, where the office of the IG monitoring team was located. The leader of the team that had visited my house introduced me to his superior, the Assistant Commissioner of Police in charge of the IG monitoring team. We engaged in a conversation during which he shared some information about Essosa's case, although it was largely what I already knew. Finally, he provided me with the details of the police station where Essosa was being detained, allowing me to plan a visit. "Madam, this is the Asokoro police station," the taxi driver said, pulling me back to the present. I paid him and got out of the car, eager to see Essosa and hear her story. When I entered the building, she was sitting behind the counter, wearing the same kaftan gown she had worn to my house a few days earlier. She greeted me warmly and introduced me to the officers around her, appearing at ease. We found a place to sit outside, and she immediately started sharing her story. It all began when my aunt returned to Abuja after spending several weeks in Benin, campaigning for her election. The day after her return, she hosted a dinner party for close friends to celebrate her victory at the polls. That night, after the guests had left, I started cleaning up when a soldier entered the kitchen and informed me that I had a visitor at the back gate. It was around 10:35 p.m. As I walked toward the boys' quarters and the back gate, I wondered who my visitor was and why they hadn't called me before coming. I reached the gate and opened it, only to see two men, total strangers, standing on the other side. I was even more puzzled, as I had never seen them before. "Are you looking for me?" I asked. "Are you Essosa?" they wanted to know. "Yes, I am," I answered, then added, "I hope there's no problem." They exchanged glances and smiled. The one closest to me, who had been speaking, replied, "No, there's no problem. We just have an important message for you." As soon as he said those words, everything went black. Just like that, Isi, I lost consciousness and have no memory of what happened afterwards. Essosa paused, and I stared at her, 1,000 thoughts swirling in my mind. I wasn't sure how to interpret the story so far, but I didn't like the direction it was taken. Still, I remained silent, and after a moment, she continued. "When I regained consciousness the next day, I found myself naked and bleeding from fresh cuts all over my body, lying in a bush. Pain throbbed in my head, and when I reached up to touch it, I realized that my once beautiful hair, long enough to fall across my shoulders, had been crudely shaved off, likely with a broken bottle, as my scalp was also cut and bleeding. As I struggled to understand what had happened and why I was there, memories started to resurface. A soldier had told me I had a visitor. I had turned to the back gate, seen two unfamiliar men, and heard one of them mention an important message. Panic and fear overwhelmed me as questions raced through my mind. Who were those men? Where had they gone? What had happened after I blacked out? No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't recall anything beyond that sinister phrase, "We have an important message for you." As I fought to stand, I wondered if those men were responsible for my being left in that bush. Wow. That was all I could say. Not only because I didn't want to interrupt the flow of the story Essosa was telling, but also because I was at a loss for words. What could I say to convey the horror I felt as I listened to Essosa's narrative? Despite my shock, Essosa continued with her story. Frightened, I screamed for help and ran, unsure of my direction. Some people avoided me, likely thinking I was mad, which made me remember I had no clothes. Searching for something to cover myself proved futile. Eventually, I was helped by a stranger who calmed me and asked questions. I told him about two men visiting my aunt's house, and he confirmed my memory of the date and listened as I explained I needed clothes and directions home. When I asked where we were, he surprised me by saying we were in Shagamu, near Lagos, not Abuja. What? You were where? I screamed in utter disbelief. I was in Shagamu, Essosa responded before continuing her story, which now had me sitting on the edge of my chair. When he told me where I was, I nearly fainted. I tried again to recall what had happened the previous night, but each time my memory reached the part where the man said, "We have an important message for you," everything went blank. I couldn't explain why. I was far from home and had no idea how I would get back. The man noticed how confused I was and kindly offered his help. He asked if there was any phone number I could remember so he could call my family from a nearby call center and let them know about my situation. At that moment, I glanced at my hand and distinctly remembered holding my mobile phone while chatting with the two strangers the night before. But now, my hand was empty. Just as I couldn't account for my clothes, I had no clue what had happened to my phone either. Fortunately, I remembered my aunt's number and gave it to the man, who jotted it down on a slip of paper he pulled from his pocket. He also asked for my name and my aunt's, then walked away, leaving me there. "And he called your aunt?" I wanted to know. I was almost going out of my mind. I couldn't wait for her to finish telling her story. "Yes, he did," she replied to my question before continuing her story. He returned after what felt like a very long time and said that Aunt Uwa insisted on speaking with me. He handed me a small piece of cloth for modesty and took me to call Aunt Uwa. She arranged for him to provide me with clothing and take me to Abuja the next day. Upon our arrival in Abuja, Aunt Uwa greeted me warmly and invited the Good Samaritan to share his experience, which he did. She thanked him repeatedly for his help and gave him a generous sum to reimburse him for his trouble, which he accepted gratefully before leaving. The moment he left, my aunt's demeanor, previously welcoming and seemingly for the guest's benefit, shifted abruptly and became stern. "Why?" I asked. It made no sense. Her relative had been kidnapped and returned home in one piece. Genuine excitement and gratitude should have been the expected response. Essosa shook her head. Anyone could tell she was just as clueless. "I have no idea, Isi," she said. "But she said to me, 'Madam, welcome. Now that you are here, you are going to tell me what deal you had with those two men who came to this house the day before yesterday to kidnap you.' It didn't end there. She threatened that if I didn't tell her that I will die. I couldn't answer since I was pretty shaken by all that had happened to me. Also, I had no idea what had brought on this change of attitude. and I did not know what she was talking about or what I was supposed to say. She let me go that night, but around 6 a.m. the next morning, a soldier came to wake me up on her orders. Still half asleep and dressed only in my night clothes, I followed him to the main house. There, Aunt Uwa introduced me to a general from Defense Intelligence and explained that he will take me to his office to ask me questions about the kidnapping. I wasn't given a chance to bathe or change. It was clear that Aunt Uwa wanted me out of the house immediately. When I mentioned that I had aches and a headache, she handed me some ibuprofen tablets, a bottle of water, and half a loaf of bread, encouraging me to eat and take the medicine on our way so that I would feel better. That morning, the general and I traveled for about 5 hours to a place called Bida. Upon our arrival at the house of a native doctor, it was clear he was expecting us, as he was waiting outside. The entire village had gathered there as well, seemingly anticipating our arrival. The native doctor asked me to confess if I had done anything wrong. When I stared at him in confusion, he started his rituals with broomsticks, occasionally chanting my name and asking the broomsticks to tie themselves if I had stolen from Aunt Uwa. Meanwhile, I was feeling exhausted from past events and the long journey. After a while, dizziness overcame me, perhaps from fatigue, lack of sleep since my kidnapping attempt, or having stood for too long. Suddenly, the room began to spin and I lost consciousness. "What an evil woman!" I exclaimed, standing up from my chair and pacing around the front of the police station, oblivious to the curious stares from passers-by. I was upset and frustrated by my inability to help Essosa in her difficult situation. All I could see from her story so far was the oppression of the poor by the rich and influential. I wished I could do something to Uwa, perhaps use her as a scapegoat to teach her a lesson that would serve as a warning to others like her. After a moment, I returned to my seat and Essosa continued telling her story. I was semi-conscious and noticed that my fall caused quite a stir. The army general rushed to pick me up from the floor and held me against his chest. The fetish priest said I was carrying a spirit of death, which was intent on taking my life. He explained that I had nearly been used for rituals, but although I had been rejected, the spirit of death still lingered and I would likely die. This frightened the general, and he quickly told the priest that he was ending the session as he needed to return me to Abuja. As he carried me to the vehicle, I could hear him muttering under his breath. "What kind of trouble is this?" he kept asking himself. "Why does this woman want to put me in trouble? What if this girl dies in my hands?" I'm not sure what he told my aunt when we arrived in Abuja, but the next morning, my older sister arrived in Abuja on the first flight. When she saw me, she immediately burst into tears and helped me pack a bag, announcing that I was returning with her to Port Harcourt. "So basically, Uwa was sending you away to die in your sister's house?" I asked. Essosa nodded. "Yes, I believe she was. I spent about 3 weeks in Port Harcourt, receiving treatment. I felt like a brand new person. My hair had started to grow, and I felt good both inside and out. One evening, Aunt Uwa called to check on how I was doing. My sister quickly informed her that I was doing well and looking great. Aunt Uwa then shared that she had secured a job for me as her personal assistant. A personal assistant to a senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. My sister saw this as a breakthrough and answered prayer, the result of her recent prayers and fasting for me. The following day, she put me on a plane back to Abuja, and I arrived at Aunt Uwa's house in the evening. Since it was late, we didn't talk. She said she would see me the next day, and I retired to my room for the night. I sighed and shook my head. Esosa, Uwa set a trap and you and your sister walked right into it. Yes, Isi, that is exactly what happened, Essosa confirmed. The day after I arrived in Abuja, she asked a soldier to fetch me. It was early in the morning, and recalling what happened the last time she sent for me, I took a bath and got dressed before responding to her call. When I arrived at the main house, she had a man with her again, and she said she wanted me to go with him to Force Headquarters. At Force Headquarters, I was informed that I would be detained. His exact words were, "Essosa, you will remain here with us for some time." Just like that? What a devil of a relative! I stood up from my chair again and began pacing angrily. Uwa sent you to Port Harcourt with the intent of leaving you to die in your sister's house. And when you didn't die, she lured you back to Abuja with the promise of a job, only to bring you to this miserable police cell to rot. At first, Essosa remained silent. She bowed her head, and I could sense that she wished she could turn back time and change what had happened. But that was no longer an option. We needed to find a way to move forward and put an end to this nightmare. After a while, she lifted her head and continued her story. Isi, that's how my experience at the police station began. 2 days after I was detained, Aunt Uwa sent her friend, Mrs. Amaka Okoye, to threaten me and collect my room key. I foolishly handed over the key, but when I mentioned it to my investigating police officer, he became angry and warned me that something could be planted in my room to frame me. After my key was taken, Aunt Uwa called the police to search my room, but they declined her request, much to her disappointment. Isi, I am still in shock and can't believe that Aunt Uwa has locked me up and denied me bail, while tarnishing my reputation by spreading lies about me to anyone who will listen. Furthermore, she has avoided meeting my parents and siblings, claiming to be too busy to see them. She has also obstructed the police investigation, dictating their actions and suggesting names of local fetish priests for them to consult. This is a woman who hasn't even provided the police with a written statement regarding what is supposedly missing. Did you say she hasn't written a statement? I asked, and Essosa nodded in response. Really? And the police had the nerve to ask me to write a second statement? I let out a dry laugh, but stopped when I realized Essosa was about to speak. When we left your house the other night, my IPOs mentioned they wanted to check on someone Aunt Uwa had asked them to visit. From their conversation, I gathered that we were going to see a well-known fetish priest in Benin. He is a powerful juju priest, and you may have seen him on television. I heard he had assisted Aunt Uwa with charms during her election, and she rewarded him with a substantial sum. From their discussion, I also learned that the chief priest was supposed to perform some spiritual work on me to determine if I had any information about Aunt Uwa's missing jewelry. However, I never met the chief priest. When we arrived at his shrine, the officer in charge expressed discomfort with the arrangement, even though it was the Inspector General's instructions stemming from Aunt Uwa. They left me in the car with one police officer and the driver, while the rest of them went to speak with the priest. I have no idea what transpired inside, but after a while they returned and we left. I was quite surprised to learn upon our arrival in Abuja that my aunt and the IG were furious because I hadn't been taken inside the priest's shrine. What was she hoping to achieve? I asked, not wanting to assume that I knew it all, and Essosa laughed dryly. Do I know? Perhaps she wants him to use his fetish powers to make me confess to stealing the jewelry. I believe this is the same objective she had when she asked that army general to take me to the fetish priest in Bida right after my kidnapping. I sighed and shook my head in frustration. It was getting late, so I had to end my visit. The next day, I started making plans to involve the press and bring public attention to what was happening to Essosa. The publicity proved effective, ultimately compelling Uwa to allow Essosa to be released on bail. After that, the case was taken to court. The court proceedings dragged on for 2 years. During that time, neither Uwa nor her husband attended any of the court sessions. However, I believe they manipulated the situation behind the scenes, making it seem like the case would never end. Whenever progress appeared to be happening, the judge would be replaced, or the case would be transferred to a different court. Each time this occurred, it meant starting over. The charges would be read again, and Essosa would have to enter her plea anew. Just as everything that begins must eventually end, Essosa's troubles came to a conclusion when a new judge dismissed her case after 2 years. The judge determined that neither Uwa nor her husband had appeared in court or sent a representative to advocate for them during that time, despite being the complainants in the case. At the final hearing, the judge dramatically threw the case file out of the courtroom, stating that the complainant, Uwa, showed no respect for the rule of law. Thus, the legal battle that had begun 2 years earlier came to an end. Throughout the entire ordeal, I found myself constantly questioning Uwa's absence from the court sessions and wondering about her true intentions from the very beginning. What had Uwa really been up to with her story about a bag of stolen jewels? The police believed it was a web of lies, but why? What had she hoped to achieve? Did the bag of jewels and the fabrications connect to the kidnapping of Essosa from the home of a retired general turned politician, a house guarded by soldiers day and night? These questions became a recurring theme in my mind, echoing the uncertainties and confusion that had surrounded the case for over 2 years. Despite repeatedly contemplating these thoughts in search of clarity or a definitive answer, I could not arrive at any conclusion that felt satisfactory. The motives behind Uwa's actions and her reasons for remaining absent during such critical proceedings continue to baffle me. Ultimately, the entire situation remained an unsolved mystery, leaving me with more questions than answers as the case finally came to a close. The end. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of episode 19 of DOZ Monologues. DOZ Monologues will return next week with another episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave your comments and subscribe, like and share if listening on YouTube. To contact me, please visit my website eturuvie.erebor.com or email me at eturuvie@eturuvieerebor.com. I invite all story lovers to explore my novels and novellas available on Amazon and Google Books. For audiobook enthusiasts, they are also on Audible. Thank you for listening. I am your favorite storyteller, Eturuvie Erebor, and I'll be here next Friday with another story.